Duh.
Ladies and gentlemen, today is the 4th of July, and I cannot think of a more patriotic superhero to talk about today than Superman. Shut up. Shut up. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Kay Swope, and in this video, we're reviewing Superman Returns. Here's how it's going to look. We're going to talk about the good things I found about the movie, the bad things I found about the movie, and then come together in the end for some notes. Now, we're going to rank the movie at the end as well on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being similar in quality to Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. 10 being similar in quality to Citizen Kane. If you don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, go check out my review for that movie. Heck, while you're at it, go check out the reviews for all my Superman films, because I've done all of them now at this point, and I will be referring to them quite a bit in this review. So if you want a little bit of extra context, don't know what exactly I'm talking about, I would recommend going and doing that right now. But we're going to go ahead and get things rolling here in this video, talking about Superman Returns. Now, let's go ahead and start with the good. First good thing about the movie, right from the very beginning, opening credits. Now, I know what you're thinking. Opening credits. Why is that so important? Tell you why it's so important, because the opening credits have always seemed to be something of a big deal in Superman films, and so seeing the opening credits done as well as they were, they pay homage to the rest of the Christopher Reeve Superman films, which is very, very nice. Plus, this being made many, many years after those new filming techniques and technology coming out, things like that, it makes this a really nice experience and is very, very nostalgic, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And I feel like this movie was really made to really hit at that nostalgia for the original Christopher Reeve Superman fans. And it's even made to take place within the same continuity, kind of, sort of, if you will. And what I mean by that is, it is a sequel to Superman and Superman 2, and thank goodness it decanonizes Superman 3 and Superman 4. So, I love that. However, really, if you think about it in like a more multiverse timeline thing, there's basically two universes. And there's one event that they talk about at the beginning of this film. We'll talk more about it a little bit later, that causes Superman to leave, and then Superman Returns, right? That's the name of the movie. But this event is that some scientists or whatever think that they can find the remains of Krypton. So Superman leaves, and he's gone for 5 years to go check it out. And then, of course, he comes back. The way I see it, the timeline splits take place there then, because it's basically, does he decide to check out Krypton or not? If he does not, Superman 3 and 4 happen. If he does, this movie happens. And I'll take this version of reality any day compared to Superman 3 and 4, because those ones are not good, and I don't need to say much more about them. Also got to say, too, some of the casting choices I really, really like. Brandon Routh as Superman, I always thought was a pretty nice choice. I know he's gone on to play other different superhero roles, and so it's kind of weird in retrospective to see him as Superman. However, building up to it, I think he's a good actor. I think he's got the build and look to pull off Superman, and so I do quite enjoy seeing his portrayal of the character here. Also, and this is going to be very, very controversial, I know, but Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor, I think, is a fantastic choice. Now, this is not me endorsing Kevin Spacey and anything that he may or may not have done in the past. I'm not talking about that. That's not what this video is about. I'm just saying, in this film, casting Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor is a great choice. He does great with the role. He looks the part very well as well. And so I got to give credit where credit is due there. Speaking of Lex Luthor, though, in general, he has a plot. He has a plan in this film, and is one that I think is, it makes sense to me. So he goes back to the Fortress of Solitude, which he discovers in Superman 2. He goes back there, finds out a bunch of Kryptonian information, finds out basically, and this is something I don't think I ever actually knew. I don't know if this is canon in the comics or not. So if it is canon and I don't know it, just hit me up in the comments. I really want to know what you guys think if you're avid Superman fans and readers. But Krypton specialized in doing everything with these crystals, right? So they would like make buildings and structures with crystals and things like that, and it was very, very fascinating. You can see that when you look at the Fortress of Solitude, right? Because it's a very crystal-y structure, things like that. Well, Lex Luthor decides, hey, you know what? There are certain crystals in the Fortress of Solitude that he ends up stealing that you add water to them and they just grow and they just build land, okay? So his idea is this: hey, you know what? Let's build a continent. Let's take a big chunk of this stone and let's launch it into the ocean and let it grow a big continent, and it's basically going to swallow up most of the United States, which is, pretty insane. It's on the wrong coast, though. You want to swallow up the West Coast because, I live on the East Coast, and we don't want that to happen. But it's a very maniacal plan, and I think at the time this movie came out, it may have felt dated to some viewers, but if you watch the other Superman films like I literally just have over the past several weeks, then you can probably say that this feels really in line with Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, who he's basically taking over the role from. And so I really, really like seeing that, and to make things better, too, he also steals kryptonite, and makes this little, what do you want to call it, cylinder, I guess, that he sticks his big rock in and it launches it. So when the big rock expands, it's basically taking kryptonite and throwing it throughout the entirety of this new land, which means that Superman has like no power there, which is really, really interesting. And again, a really, really good idea as well. So again, that is pretty great. But another great thing about this film, I got to point out too, the score is fantastic. Now, these are Superman themes, you know, the John Williams, all that stuff. I think every Superman film up to this point has. John Ottman does a great job with it, and I have a lot of problems about the scoring and how it's just used not well or not, you know, good at all in Superman 3 and 4. And this movie does not have that same problem whatsoever. So I think the scoring is fantastic, sounds good, makes for some really nice cinematic feeling moments. Something else, I'm going to refer back very heavily to the Zack Snyder Superman films, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman here, but I talked a lot about the God metaphor with Superman, the God/Jesus metaphor, and so this film does that a little bit to a much lesser extent. It's not really on the nose with it, but when we see Superman, and spoiler alert, in case you didn't see the first one at the beginning of this video, he has a son, and it's very fascinating because we kind of see the whole relationship, like the Jesus relationship, I think a little bit with Jesus and God the Father, played out in a similar way between these two characters, specifically closer to the end of the film, but it's still very interesting to see because Superman spends a lot of this film sort of being lonely because, you know, it's acknowledged at the beginning of the film a lot that he is the last son of Krypton, obviously. He feels alone in many ways, and Lois Lane has moved on. She's found a new dude, and she's got what he thinks is a kid with her, but that's not true. We find out later. So having a really hard time with that, a really hard struggle, and he realizes that that kid is his son. Okay, so it's like the opposite of Billie Jean by Michael Jackson. But the kid is not my son. But anyways, again, it's a really subtle, and maybe I'm digging for this because, you know, I liked it so much in the Zack Snyder stuff. But either way, whether it's there or not is up for debate. But if it's there, I like it quite a lot. If it's not, then disregard everything I just said. Also got to say, this film has the sauce. It looks good. It feels good. The coloring is fantastic. The set design is fantastic. Costuming is fantastic. It feels very much like they're taking heavy inspiration from both Christopher Reeve Superman films, the early ones, specifically Superman, Superman 2, that plus the Golden Age comics. And you just kind of bring those together and you kind of get the aesthetic for this film. It's a really nice aesthetic, very, very beautiful. But that's unfortunately going to close out the good stuff I have for the film Superman Returns. Now, full disclosure, before we get into the bad section, I kind of want to lay my chips on the table, if you will. This, always in my mind, I always thought to myself, this is one of the better Superman films. This is one of the best ones. And after rewatching it, and I was watching it, I realized that, you know, this one does not hold up as well as I remember it. So we're going to dive into the bad things. And a lot of these ideas are going to be more new ideas I haven't quite thought about quite yet. But the first thing, and when I say first thing, I mean literally in the first scene that we see Lex Luthor taking advantage of an old lady. And it's really uncomfortable. And it's literally like the first thing we see in the film after the opening credits. So that's kind of strange. And it's not that Lex Luthor wouldn't do that. It's more that I just don't like seeing that, if that makes sense. Especially because the lady references he provided some form of pleasure. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to know or think or hear about any of that. He basically just does that for a while, lets her die, and then puts himself as the beneficiary in her will, which makes him rich and gives him a lot of resources, which is actually really nice because that is a pretty decent way to modernize the character without completely divorcing him from the Gene Hackman that we know from the previous Superman films, because that Lex Luthor was not, you know, some type of genius billionaire. I mean, he was still a genius, but, you know, didn't have money to his name. Now he has money to his name, but he got it from a scheme that just kind of feels natural and makes sense. So again, you could probably say that all I'm talking about are good things about this plot point. And yeah, I mean, so I'm not really holding this point against it specifically. I just think the scene was weird. I didn't like it, especially that one line I talked about earlier. It was just not good. Felt so odd. Felt so weird. I previously also mentioned the whole Superman leaving to check out Krypton remains and stuff like that. And although it makes for a really interesting plot point to split the timeline from Superman 3 and 4 timeline and Superman Returns timeline, it's flimsy. It's really, really flimsy because it wouldn't make sense, I don't think, to me that Superman, Clark Kent, would just up and leave Earth for so long after he's, you know, done all the things that he's done on Earth. It just feels really forced when they talk about it. Now, we don't get to see what any of that space exploration looks like unless you're playing the Superman Returns video game. But it doesn't feel like a good plot point. It's so dumb. And not to mention, too, part of it is Lex Luthor escaped his like double life sentence or whatever, because Superman, since he was off in space doing who knows what, did not attend his trial to testify against him. And, you know, that's, of course, the biggest person who knows everything bad about Lex Luthor is Superman. So I think that's just a really, really bad point of view. It's not a good plot point. It doesn't stick, doesn't hold up well. Something else doesn't hold up well is the suit in this film. I find it a little lacking in a few areas. I don't dislike the design per se. I think the belt looks weird because it's got the Superman emblem on it as well, which is the first time I think I've ever seen that. So that's strange. But mostly, it's the fact that the red color on the suit looks really muted and kind of like a brownish. And I don't know why. I think it looks weird. And it brings me back to like drunk Superman 3. It's not great. If you recolored the suit, I think it would look a lot better, but the new suit design just kind of the emblem, I don't like it. It pops out too much on the chest, and that also looks kind of dumb, I think. So new suit is just kind of mid, but it's also strange too because in this film we see Superman literally stalking Lois Lane, and that is also really, really weird. He hears her address, and then a little bit later he flies over there, uses X-ray vision and his super hearing to just stalk them for a conversation or so. Then he goes and saves a bunch of people and stuff, which, you know, is nice and very Superman-esque. But that is still weird. That's a big abuse of power. And that's something, unfortunately, we've been seeing in a lot of these films, is Superman just abusing his power. And I really don't like that because I feel like with Superman, at least in the comics from what I know, and other Superman media, they make a really big deal about how, you know, he was growing up, uses powers for good, this, and that. And in these films, we just keep seeing him abuse his power over and over again. All for selfish reasons, too, might I add. But I'll put it like this. If I'm being completely honest, now that I'm at the end of this kind of continuity, the Superman through Superman 4 and Superman Returns continuities and stuff, there's a lot of problems I have with it in general. I just feel like they don't hit certain Superman things very well. Like they say Superman cannot interact or interfere with like humanity in certain ways, but then it's like, well, he's saving people every single day, so he's breaking that rule all the time. And I feel like everywhere else when Superman is seen, it's more like you are here for a reason to help people. You have this power to help people. And that's just not the vibe that all the Kryptonian people and stuff keep giving him in this film, and again this one also as well. And it doesn't make sense whatsoever. It's like, what's even the point of having a Superman film if you're gonna have these characters, the Elders of Krypton, all that stuff, tell you don't interact with people, but then he interacts with people anyways and interferes with the courses of history and whatever. And it's just it doesn't make sense. It's like it's added for no reason. Just don't add it. Just think of something else. Switching gears a little bit too, I also have to say that the CGI in this film, again, 2006, I think it was, very subpar, I think. It's not great. It gives me Polar Express vibes from time to time, and it's not good, obviously, very unfortunate. And then I have a few points about the plot I gotta say, specifically, that I don't think are very, very good. For one, there's this really wishy-washy love story going on between James Marsden, Superman, and Lois Lane. And yeah, I called him James Marsden because I forget his character's name. And Lois is just so wishy-washy about the whole thing because first, when Superman up and leaves, she's, you know, all mad and salty about it. And then when Superman comes back, he just, like, almost immediately, like, snags her approval again. And it's just, I don't know, it feels so dumb. And Superman's kind of being a homewrecker now. I mean, let me rephrase that. He's being a homewrecker twice because, for one, still the Lois Lane thing, kind of, sort of. You know, she's still there. He's back in the picture. He's Supermaning up everything. If a Clark Kent just showed back up, it wouldn't be a problem. You know, he could show up and coexist. But he's just got a Superman all over the problem, and it just makes it weird. It's a bad love triangle. And probably the worst part about it is that James Marsden's character is such a nice guy, too, and he really does not deserve to be treated like that. And I was thinking it's quite convenient how this super son just kind of shows up, and it's like, oh, well, if she was, you know, doing the devil's dance with Superman, then don't you think, hey, this kid is probably Superman's? Or did Superman use his amnesia kiss again, which we don't see in this film, thank goodness, to make her forget about that? Because if that's the case, that's like some real Bill Cosby type stuff, and I seriously don't want to think about Superman doing that. But he could, and we know he abuses his power in this timeline, so like, what the literal heck? So yeah, the love triangle stuff does not hit very well. And while I'm on the topic of it too, Superman's kid, I forget his name, Jason, that's it, it's Jason. I don't like the idea, not that I don't like the idea of Superman having a son, having a kid, because I think some of the best Superman stuff I've ever read, even though I haven't read a whole lot of Superman stuff, is like the Rebirth stuff where we have Jonathan Kent as Superboy. I think that is fantastic, makes for some great plots and plot points. But this feels just weird, feels kind of wrong. It just don't feel like Superman should have a son like this. In the comic with Jonathan Kent, okay, Superman and Lois, they get married. There's a bunch of dimensional travel shenanigans that come in because the Superman of the main Earth dies, blah, 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 and this one comes back from the old Earth, and yeah, it's really confusing. But at that point, him and Lois are married, and they have a son, and the son develops superpowers, and so he's training him as the next super Kryptonian, whatever. He becomes Superboy, okay? And so I like that idea, and I really like how they executed that in the Rebirth comics. Now, again, this is like 2016, like 10 years after this film came out. However, I think they tackle that idea much better in the comic than they do here and now. So I'm not a fan of how they executed that at all. I would rather just get rid of the son entirely, although the problem is the son is so interweaving into the story that you'd have to find so many other ways to storytell, which is, quite unfortunate. But it's an angle I don't like. We'll put it like that. I do not like that angle in this film specifically. Something else I hate. So Lex Luthor, he's got, his dumb bimbo sidekick lady, and her name's Kitty in this. And I'm so tired of the dumb bimbo lady henchman flip-flopping sides, and she does that. This is Tessemacher, or whatever her name was, from the first Superman film. First two, actually. In the first one, she flip-flops, helps Superman, and I just think the whole thing is dumb. I'm tired of it. Just an overdone trope at this point. And I get they're trying to pay homage to the original Superman films. This whole film, in many ways, is just one giant homage. I also think this film has a lack of closure, because Superman nearly dies at the end. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. And then he just kind of flies to Jason, gives him the same monologue his dad in the hologram gave him. Then he just kind of flies off at the end. And it's like, well, what's going to happen then? What the heck's going on with the son? What's the deal with that? We never heard anything. How is Lois and Richard, is Richard his name? James Marsden's character? Anyways, how are James Marsden and Lois going to go on? Are they going to keep raising Superman's kid for him? Is Superman going to come back? Is he going to raise his own kid? I don't know. And there's no closure for that at all in the film. And that's like the last note they leave us on. And I hate that because I want answers because I have so many questions. Anyways, moving into some other stuff. I have two notes in this film I want to talk about specifically. For one, I did not realize Kal Penn was in this movie. That is hilarious. Kumar is in Superman Returns. And it's so weird because he gets a lot of screen time, but he says almost nothing in the whole film. I don't know if he says an entire line. He might say like one line or two, but I cannot think specifically of a line that he says. And it's insane because he's just there the whole time. And you're like, yeah, that's Kal Penn, but he's not saying anything. He's just kind of there doing Lex Luthor's bidding. And it's pretty insane. It's kind of funny, but I don't think it's supposed to be. So that's kind of why I put it here in the the neutral zone, the notes section. So I don't know. But something else I got to point out too. This film is by a now notorious director, Bryan Singer. Now Bryan Singer, another guy, a lot of allegations against him, which is kind of funny given that it's both him and Kevin Spacey. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on there. Again, I'm not here to talk about that. But Bryan Singer, he has a good track record with superhero films. He's done some great ones. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, he actually ditched X-Men Last Stand to do this movie instead, which is very, very interesting. And I don't hate either of those films. I don't hate this film. I don't hate that film. Interesting track record. He's made some great X-Men movies, and then he phoned in Bohemian Rhapsody, and by phoned in, I mean filmed half of it and stopped showing up to work. So that's fun. But overall, ladies and gentlemen, Superman Returns. I know I just said a lot of really negative things about it. I said some good things about it, though, too. It's definitely not as bad as some of the other Superman movies I've reviewed so far. But overall, at the end of the day, it is still probably one of my favorites, to be quite honest, even though I know it's so flawed. It's just one that I enjoy going back and rewatching. It's probably entirely because of the cozy, I don't know, I guess I call it cozy, but the feel of the movie, the aesthetics, I like Brandon Routh, I like the cast, I like all this kind of stuff. So I like the sizzle more than the steak itself, but the sizzle is quite nice. And so as a result, I'm giving Superman Returns, ladies and gentlemen, a 6.5 out of 10. Now, that is the second highest Superman film I've ranked so far, highest being Batman vs. Superman. I know, crazy. If you want to hear why I think that's so good, check out that video. But will James Gunn's Superman movie be able to dethrone these two films? Well, we're going to find out next week, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be getting a review out as soon as humanly possible. I'm seeing the film the Thursday before it comes out, and I'm very, very excited for it. I'm going to come home as soon as I'm done watching the film, put the review together, and post it immediately. So, that being said, if you want to see that, hit that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications, and we will have more coming through to you. But, ladies and gentlemen, going to wrap things up for me. I'm K-Swope. I will see you with James Gunn's Superman film coming out next week. But in the meantime, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.